You know, as much as I can talk about misandry and the extent to which society really hates men in some respects, most particularly black men, I do have to say we hate our damn selves. We really do. We practice a level of misandry on each other that's fucking ridiculous. Brotherhood has truly become a lost art. What's good, y'all? Welcome back to the Onyx Report, Black Masculinist news for the day. Hope everybody is well. My apologies for the lateness. Planned to get this one out earlier this morning, but summer school has started, and I ended up having a meeting that kind of took things away before I could record my little video. So my apologies. Remember to like, share, subscribe, join, and donate. Support the channel if you will, so we can continue to bring you independent black news from a black masculinist perspective. And again, this is one example of black male media you're not going to get from anywhere else. So support so that we can continue to do this. But when I talk about black men hating each other, the reason I bring that up is because I recently did a video, did a couple, showing black men in vulnerable situations. Don't have their own housing, their own means, and of course they're in abusive relationships, emotionally, psychologically abusive relationships, staying with women who are in control of their households and of course are mistreating them because they have the power to. And, in pointing that out, what I noticed is the first reaction other black men had was their disdain for the vulnerability that black men find themselves in, especially in regard to housing. I wanted to bring some information to that, but before I delve into it, this is what I refer to as volitional misandry. Volitional misandry. Volitional basically just is the act of choice. It's act of will. It's a decision made, the power to choose. And what we choose to do is to inflict misandry on ourselves. Anytime we see a black male in a vulnerable situation or a compromising position, we blame him. And in as much as it can be a useful tool to self-motivate, to identify the problems in ourselves, and I am an advocate of that, there is a point where we go to the point where it becomes damaging to the self. Here's the thing. It's important to be able to criticize one's own and one's own self. It is also important to have a humanistic level of empathy for yourself as well, especially when the condition you're living in has been orchestrated over generations. None of this shit is an accident. Now, what do I mean? Well, in regard to housing, I want to show y'all something. So this is a tweet that comes from one alderwoman, Jeanette Taylor, right? And she talks about an affordable housing voucher she applied for in 1993. Says she finally got a call back in 2004 to tell me my son, who just graduated high school, couldn't be on my lease. Today in 2022, I finally got a letter telling me I made it to the top of the waiting list. I have no words. She continues in another tweet. She says, 29 years. I have no words for how this system continues to fail our communities and those in need of stable, affordable housing. In those 29 years, the housing crisis in Chicago has only gotten worse. This is my lived experience. This is what keeps me in this fight. No one should have to wait 29 years to get what should be a basic right in the richest country in the world. Because of this experience, I don't campaign contributions from private developers. I don't take campaign contributions from private developers. I want to be accountable to my community, period. And then she begins to list a way you can support. Now, I'm going to put the link for that in the description box, right? So this is Alderwoman Jeanette Taylor of Chicago. But here's the thing. This letter, as you can see, tells her your application has been selected from the federal MTW HCV program, WL waiting list, and you may now begin the application for eligibility process. Please complete the application for eligibility using CHA's Rent Cafe to register, and it gives her all the instructions from there. But what she says early on in the post is what blew me out of the water, right? I finally got a call back in 2004 to tell me my son, who just graduated high school, couldn't be on my lease. She doesn't mention anything else about it in this particular tweet other than to say that, but I found that line to be particularly interesting. What that means to me, excuse me, hold on. Sorry about that. What that means to me, though, is that this is something that goes on, especially as it relates to young Black men, that we don't talk about. Insecure housing, right? As early as high school graduation. So here you have what I believe to be a single mother, right? Who is, there we go. Single mother who's getting housing and is being told that her high school son or high school graduating son can't live with her. And what happens when he has no other place to go? I've seen this occur in different ways in California as well. And I've seen some of these young brothers head straight to a park bench. It usually starts going from couch to couch, house to house, friend's house to friend's house. But of course, at that age, all your friends live with their parents. So you stay until you're asked to leave. And then what? Some of these brothers have a very difficult time starting out, and it's not strictly about laziness. Sometimes it's actually about a limiting of resources. And one of the things we do is we're taught very early on that our kids need to be out by 18. Now, I don't have a problem with kids being out by 18 as long as we are teaching them a plan, as long as we're crafting a plan with them so that they can navigate this stage of things with support. Otherwise, this is what it ends up contributing to. Right? So check this out. This is the Demographic Data Project, Gender and Individual Homelessness. Right? Let me see if I can enlarge it there. There we go. It's out the way. So Demographic Data Project, Gender and Individual Homelessness. You can find this on endhomelessness.org. Again, I will put the links to this in the description box. You can download the PDF. But let's see what it has to say about this. And shout out to my boy Asangwa. Appreciate the support he gave me earlier. Sending me a couple links. Shout out to him. But it reads, homelessness among men and women at a point in time. 67% of all people experiencing homelessness within the 2018 point in time count are individuals. There are 260,284 men compared to 106,119 women. Thus, men are a majority of individuals experiencing homelessness by 70%, followed by women at 29%. Final 1% are transgender and non-binary individuals discussed in the first installment of this series. So inasmuch as it's important to identify everybody who's experiencing homelessness or any other, malady, we also have to look at who's experiencing it to the greatest degree. And one of the things we find in this particular point in time report is that the majority that experience that homelessness are men. Now, I'm inclined, based on the data I've seen over the last 15 years, to say that this is pretty widespread. And it doesn't deter from this to any great degree. I would argue men are the majority of the homeless. The majority. But let's also contrast that with some other data. Now, we know prior to the pandemic, right, it got to the point where 50% of America's homeless were Black. And the majority of the homeless, period, tend to be men. But what we find on this particular page, this is HUD releases 2021 Annual Homeless Assessment Report, Part 1. You can find this on HUD.gov. Again, I will provide the link. This is as of February 4th, 2022. Scroll down toward the bottom and it says sheltered homelessness among people of color. Right? More than 4 of every 10 people experiencing sheltered homelessness were Black, 45%. 44% were white. Of course, the significance of this is we're only about 13% of the population. That should tell you something. Right? The remaining 10% were people identifying as multiple races, Native American at 2%, Asian 1%, Pacific Islander 1%. Between 2020 and 2021, the number of Black or African American people staying in shelters decreased by 12%. People who were of more than one race decreased by 10%, while the number was relatively small. The number of people who were Pacific Islander increased by 10%. So that has to do with people who find shelter, right? That's shelter. What do we mean by unsheltered? Right? In a sample of 138 communities that conducted full unsheltered counts in both 2020 and 2021, nearly half of people experiencing homelessness, 46%, were individuals staying in sheltered locations. 37% were people in families with children staying in sheltered locations. 15% were unsheltered individuals, and 3% were unsheltered people in families with children. Now, this is a sample that they took. But what we know is that the largest population is Black, racially speaking. And the population from there, in terms of gender, are men. So what do you think that means when we cross-section the two? Black males, more than likely, have the highest populations of homelessness. More than likely. The reports are a little conflicting, especially since the pandemic, because I won't say conflicting, but they're not completely verified, because at the end of the day, nobody counts all the homeless. They estimate based on sample sizes, based on various studies. But for the most part, much of the data points us back to that. So when we start talking about unhoused and unsheltered, and sheltered for that matter, Black men find themselves to be the most vulnerable. And when we talk about that, the first response by other Black men is to talk about them and to suggest that they are either just lazy, unproductive, incapable. They just need to grind harder. It's amazing some of the things I've heard. And at some point, we do have to learn this lost art of brotherhood. Because if you can't even talk about Black men with some degree of respect for what we're dealing with, I don't know how we ever get to the point of actually moving on something. It starts with a degree of humanistic compassion. Now, that does not mean that there's no accountability. It simply means that if we at least regard ourselves as human and talk about what's going on with us, most particularly referencing data, that should be the beginning point. Then we can strategize some type of support network, solution, something. But if it just ends at laziness or dismissal, we just contribute to the same narrative that everybody else already has about Black men. And that shit is tired. Look, none of this is an accident. None of it. The fact that Black men are the most homeless, the fact that they're consistently the least employed, none of this stuff is accidental. So making it a product of individual effort, it may sound good on one level or another to those of us that just want to act like you can just muscle your way through this shit, but it's really institutional and it's not an accident. So when Black men are vulnerable in these situations, we got to have a different fucking conversation at some point. Because all this browbeating doesn't do anything for us. Y'all have a good one. Peace.